What's up, NFTBERLIN? Looks like everyone's having a good time. So we actually have a pretty interesting conversation here. And we're going to be talking about, why does Web3 matter? Why does Web3 technology matter? And what the fuck does that actually mean? Can I say that? Cool. It's Berlin, right? We don't have rules here. So some of you have seen me, some of you haven't. My name's Dr. Benton Banner. I am the managing director of ntent.art, a collective that is based out of Berlin. We specialize in smart contract platform technology and generative art. And I'm going to pass the mic to the left for the other panelists to introduce themselves.
Hey, I'm Shannon. I'm head of growth at Livepeer, decentralized video infrastructure network, proof of stake protocol built on Ethereum, and we decentralize something that takes up about 90% of the internet's bandwidth, which is video, and specifically video transcoding. I'm super excited to be on this panel to talk about why decentralizing core internet infrastructure like video processing, storage, etc., is hugely important for people creating content on the web.
Hello everyone, my name is Philipp. I'm the founder of Creco.xyz. Creco stands for Creators and Collectors. This is basically our community where we provide them with tools to launch NFT collections, explore NFT collections and launches. We recently did a launch with our own NFT collection which explores use cases around on-chain metadata.
Hey everyone, my name is Konstantin. I'm a startup operator from Protocol Labs. Protocol Labs is behind all the storage layer of Web3. We're developing tools like IPFS, Filecoin, NFT.storage, Web3.storage, and we're making sure that the content creators and just creators in the web has the power and owning the content that they're creating, not just centralized structures which are siloing your data or controlling what you actually create by yourself.
So most of us are here because Web 2 is not a vibe. And we really see that Web 3 is the future, but does anyone really know what Web 3 is? Maybe a show of hands? Maybe no one knows? That's what I thought, and that's why we're here. So I'm gonna maybe pose this question to you of just enlightening everyone who didn't raise their hand, which was absolutely no one in the crowd of NFTBERLIN conference. So what is Web 3 and how is that different from Web 2 and why does it matter?
Yeah, I think that's like the most important question. And I think Web 3 means something different to everyone depending on the context you're in. For me, Web 3 is not about speculation. Web 3 is not about DeFi or CryptoKitties necessarily. It's about utility. It's about decentralizing the provision of service on the internet. And we think about when we ask like what's different from Web 2 to Web 3, the entire business model of the internet is fundamentally disrupted by blockchain and when you use blockchain to provide core internet services. And in the Web 2 world, why Google, why Facebook have had to monetize your information is because the cost of the infrastructure that they're running is so freaking expensive that they've had to find creative ways of just bleeding as much money as they can from you. So when you use blockchain, you can drastically reduce the cost. And when you use peer-to-peer networks, which is essentially what blockchain is, you dramatically reduce the cost of just providing that infrastructure. So in Web 2, if you're a content creator, YouTube owns your content. If you get deplatformed, guess what? They own your follower base, and you can't take that to another platform. In Web 3, where you have internet service providers like Livepeer or IPFS or Arweave or the Graph, which is effectively the Google of Web 3 doing search and query, platforms don't have to pay as much to run their infrastructure, so they don't have to monetize your data. So that, for me, is really the difference from Web 2 to Web 3, and why ancillary technologies like NFT can allow creators to own that content.
So, in short, basically what you're telling me is that individual data sovereignty and platform sovereignty is a big part of Web 3, and maybe Konstantin, I know you're itching to contribute.
Yeah, Shannon is completely right that everyone has their own perspective on what Web3 essentially is. I really love to give this perspective of the history. So at some point of time, the internet appeared. It was like wires and cables which are connecting multiple computers. They formed some form of a network. Then there was Web 1.0. Web 1.0 was just the internet where you can read. There were static web pages. It was like, that's the only function you can do. You could go and read some website. Someone created it, uploaded it to web, and you can access it. Then the Web 2 appeared, which was read and write, and apparently that's where most of the applications which we use day to day are right now. Read and write means that you can first of all access the site, you can see what's happening there, but you can also interact with it, read to it, write to it, and then apparently have some communication interactions through the Web 2. Now we are all talking about Web 3, and Web 3 to me is the essential part of read, write, and then trust. And trust being an operative thing here, there are multiple solutions which enabling trusting you. But what trust means particularly to me is that, first of all, you own and control of what you create and have the infrastructure which works for you. And you have the decentralization of the power. So no one is powerful than you in the network. And you do not need to trust someone, give your data to someone else so they can operate it on your behalf. You rather control and really operate what's happening with your data, whether you're a content creator, whether you're a scientist. You really want to have this ownership of what I have created. And that's where the trust being like, I trust myself. Obviously, at least I hope that everyone here in the audience trusts themselves. And afterward, you can decide whom else you can trust, but there is no need to do so because Web3 allows you to be the owner, the distributor of the content which you create, and by itself allowing everyone to access this content because that's what you're ultimately looking for. If you don't want to interact with someone, it's like, again, the decision of a certain person, which networks, which solutions you're using to distribute the content. And if something you want to lock up, it's again up to you. But we are here exactly to exchange, to share, and avoid this censorship, avoid this silo of the data. And that's where the trust is being super, super important as a primitive that allows you to interact with the web freely.
So the future of Web3 is a place where I, as a creator, build my following, build my community, build my creative outputs over time, but I don't have all of my information siloed into a centralized resource that's owned by someone else or by a corporation, right? It's something that, like what you're saying?
Yeah, totally. That's where you have the freedom to choose the platform, choose the blockchain, choose whatever matter or mean of exchange of information you want to have and use it for your particular purpose, content, science, applications, just chatting. Even like we are right now super logged by the WhatsApp, by any other platform. It's not even easy to transfer context, not speaking about chats, messages. The most important for us is essentially not what the platform provides, but what we actually use. We use it for communication, not for being on WhatsApp, Telegram, or Facebook. And that's where I believe the Web3 allows you to do this paradigm shift where now you decide where we chat and applications built around it is just a function, but you own all these chats. You can transform it or transfer it from one to another to the next point, but you keep it to your, by yourself. And that's an amazing thing which we never had before. And I think that's where the most value is appearing for us in the Web3 is to actually be in control.
Philipp, do you have a comment on this?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I think I share the view. Before I started Creco, I was working for the Ethereum Foundation, so I have a very technical view, I think. The web, for me, is a network of networks. You can divide it into different layers. On the lowest layer, you have like cables, switches, routers, and then on top of it, you have protocols, TCP/IP, and then application layer, where you actually build websites, apps. You can focus on different interesting properties and aspects of the network. I think for me, Web3 is extending this stack and making the web more collaborative and open for new participants to enter, instead of just like letting big corporations dictate how the internet functions and which things they think are necessary are the new standards. So it's more about openness and extending the web that we have with a new network.
Would you say an organization like Ethereum, the blockchain, is a representation of a Web3 organization at this point in time, or is it more of a partial step in that direction?
What is a Web3 organization? Is it a DAO?
Is it a DAO?
Do we want to talk about DAOs? You know, I think another like really important principle of you know, Web3 technology is permissionlessness, to be part of it and to actually own it. So Livepeer, for example, if you own Livepeer token, the purpose of that token is to reward people who want to run nodes on the Livepeer network and provide GPU transcoding capacity to the network, which is what video transcoding is. And so you get rewarded in Livepeer token for doing that. You also own part of the network as a result, and you also participate in the governance of the protocol. So any decisions around upgrading, making like core changes to the protocol, as a token holder, you get to participate in that. And if you don't want to run a node, but you want to hold Livepeer token, you can actually delegate your token to a node operator, and they can vote on your behalf. In Livepeer's case, you actually still can vote if you're a delegator, but you don't run a node. That just doesn't happen in Google. You know, who owns Google? It's like, or who owns Twitter now? It's one person. How many people use Twitter? Billions. Like, it's like, do we want to live that way forever?
Konstantin.
Yeah, and maybe to add on Web3 organizations in general, I think the beauty of Web3 right now, especially when so many solutions emerge, that there should not be one single organization which is in charge of everything. We're rather all together building a composable solution, composable internet, which consists of many smaller blocks, whether it's a developer, transcoding solution, storage solution, logic layer. And that's the beauty of it, where even whenever you create an app, you can use multiple blocks from different teams, from different projects, and still have a working solution which end user can use, enjoy, and operate on top of. And that's where this composability in the end allows us to be independent of single platform, single, like we have OpenSea, we have Rarible, we have many different tools which everyone can use at one point of time, but also they are not locked inside. And that's where, independently of what's happening to one chain, to one particular coin, we're still having this freedom of choosing what we're using and what our users will be going through to access our content, to access our information. And that's where the composability in the first place allows us to give this freedom of choice and decentralization of power. And that's where I would really love to see the Web3 going further, is decentralizing the power of owning the internet, of controlling the internet, but really giving it back to the users, back to the developers, and back to the content creators by themselves.
Do y'all consider your organizations DAOs? So I know, like, is Protocol Lab a DAO? Or does it hold an infrastructure where everyone who's a holder of that token essentially can contribute to making decisions? And is that by definition a DAO? You know, we know DAO is kind of like a trendy buzzword at this point in time, but the democratization of systematic entities that help these layers function so that we can all freely do what the fuck we want is an interesting place to be.
Yeah, totally. I would say that Protocol Labs is right now going through the nucleation process. Originally, Protocol Labs was governing, for all your knowledge, we were governing all the protocols, IPFS, Filecoin, dot storage solutions. But right now, we are truly standing to this decentralization point, and we are actually nucleating all the protocols to be an independent organizations themselves. So they can, first of all, decide what they want to do. They can become a DAO as well, and we see that some of the projects are becoming a DAOs because that's the way they want to operate, and that's the way they find it interesting to operate. It's not mandatory to be a DAO to be decentralized, though, and it's rather you really want to decentralize the power also within a company, and that's an experiment which no one has done before, and we're even like, it's a really challenge to decentralize what you have built as a solid structure. But if we succeed, then we have a really showcase example that everyone can decentralize their own organization and actually be an independent, smaller contributors, again, the composable building blocks that all together can form a one solid, for example, storage layer solution, but they don't need to. And that's the beauty of it. Like being independent from a larger organization, have an ability to create a DAO, to create a structure which allows you to govern yourself, regardless of what someone says from the external team, is an amazing thing. And we never have seen before. I think the problem right now is still to bridge this crypto world, Web3 world, with a legal framework on the ground in the countries, having this legal bonding, how we operate, how we organize ourselves. Maybe that's a topic to a completely different discussion, but this notion of giving back the ability to organize and self-manage is just unique, and we never have seen it before. So I'm super pro to DAOs, to governing yourself and allowing either the community or holders of the coins, or in any other form. It doesn't need to be a DAO in the first place, but whenever you distribute the power to as many people as you think is important to, that's the beauty of life.
Philip, do you have something that you want to say? I see you over there with thoughts pondering in your mind.
I think there are multiple definitions of a DAO. There is a very blockchain-specific definition of a DAO where you have startups creating tools to bootstrap your own DAO, which is mostly like governance protocols, token voting, certain like tools where you write your proposals and then you have your community vote on it. By this definition, I think we're not a DAO. I would argue, though, that a lot of people building in this space are kind of becoming DAOs. Maybe they're on Discord, maybe they have just some like people they met through the internet, and they start to collaborate and they vote through emojis, but they're building something, they're creating something. In our team, we have roughly 30 contributors who just put in work into the project to get it off the ground. So to me, that's already a DAO. To formalize it, you need certain legal frameworks. So we have a company to represent us. For DAOs, usually you have a foundation or whatever. There are some like legal considerations how you like bridge it to the real world, to the normie world, kind of. But we are acting already, like we are acting a lot as DAOs, and I think it's very cool and very creative to do this.
That's a really amazing point. I really like it, the perspective that even if it's a Discord, if you vote for something, you put an emoji, that's already participating in a creation. And I think we can really step down like the definition of a DAO rather than just participation in the organization. Then it becomes amazing. For us, we run multiple, like more than 1,000 different protocols, different GitHub repositories, and people, they are fully open, and then people can all contribute to it, regardless of the background, regardless of their knowledge. If they do a meaningful contribution, they are participating in form of organization or a structure to create a greater good. And that's like, can be also a form of DAO where we give like this opportunity of people to be part of something bigger. And whatever, if we need to formalize it in a structure and organization, we can do so, but it's not always necessary. In the end, that's exactly the notion of giving the ability to contribute regardless of us being in a structure or not being in a structure is something which brings the value to DAO being in place right now.
Yeah. Open source culture is like pretty core to Web3 as well, and like arguably open source culture was Web 1 as well. But now with Web3, we have an opportunity to make open source technology and communities sustainable by leveraging the economic incentives that tokenization can provide. Does every DAO need a token to provide effective rewards to its community? Probably not, and that's where I think there's a really exciting cultural, monetized aspect of Web3 as well, which is people get other kinds of rewards by participating in a project, by being part of a community where they aren't necessarily seeking financial compensation for that, but they get so much from being part of the community that it's why they want to contribute, and it's what they feel they get back. And that's why I think this is such an unstoppable force, personally.
So the three of you are specializing in Web3 technology, right? How is that impacting those communities, and how is Web3 technology actually going to change the current existence of Web 2? And maybe how far away are we from fully realizing that existence?
Yeah, there's a really interesting example. How many people are familiar with Patreon? Awesome.
Everyone.
So about a month ago, so Patreon currently has an agreement with Vimeo to use Vimeo as its video hosting and streaming service for the video creators on the Patreon platform. And about a month ago, Vimeo made a fundamental strategic shift in its business direction that it no longer wanted to support independent video creators because it was too expensive to do so. They wanted to focus on corporate clients. So the CEO literally came out and said, we are now a B2B service. We are not an indie alternative to YouTube. What that meant is for individual Patreon creators, there's a case of a woman who was paying $200 a year to Vimeo as a Patreon creator to post her videos there. It turns out her videos had a lot of bandwidth associated with them. So Vimeo had tagged her as like, oh, this is an expensive user. And they said that your annual bill is going to go from $200 to $3,500 a year unless you lower the type of video content you're creating. You create less videos, or you just leave and you can go find an alternative service. So that actually happens a lot. And I think we are going to start seeing more of this. Is the Web3 technology ready as an alternative for Patreon creators in this case? I think we're getting there. Livepeer's been around since 2017. We have a really solid, reliable video infrastructure network. If you're a dev and you want to build a video app, go to livepeer.com and check out our developer tooling. We're getting there. I think that, there's still the nature of the composability of Web3 applications is such that you do have to use a lot of different pieces together. We're trying to educate developers on that right now, but we're working on it.
So the reoccurring theme that I'm getting here is basically Web3 is freedom, right? The example that you just gave is essentially corporate extortion, right? I hold all of your data, I hold everything, all of your creative IP is essentially my corporate IP, and if I feel like I want to make a decision where I want to, let's say, cut costs on my half to increase profits and charge you more money, I have full control because you have no autonomy to take your information anywhere else. So an interoperable Web3 where I'm within the place of being free, right, and sovereign to say, okay, well, there's an application over here, there's an application over here, there's an application over here, but the independence of my existence and all of my content is mine. And so if, for example, Tkachuk takes a shit and completely disappears, well, I can just go over to object and all of my stuff still exists and is still mine. My art is mine, my contract is mine, my NFTs are mine. So that's an interesting thing. Did you have something to comment on that?
Yeah, I totally see that this is the future, first of all.
And that's what happened, just by the way. When Hen's founder decided he didn't want to work on the project anymore for whatever reason and just bailed, the community was like, shit, can we still access our NFTs? As it turns out, those NFTs were stored on IPFS, and the community was able to carry forward with the platform because of that.
And that's the beauty where we are developing mainly the protocols for storage, so we do not even own your data, or no one except you owns your data. So this freedom of not being bonded to one platform, and your content is also independent of the platform itself, is that where we truly reach the decentralization. So that's where, even if some project fails, even if some NFT program fails, or even if some content creator says, okay, goodbye, grab the money, I want to go out, if the content was first of all stored through the IPFS or through any protocol which allows you to be storing independently across multiple chains, boom, you still have your data. And it's independent of the content platform which you were using to show in it. It's rather you were in the first place controlling that stuff, and you can recreate it if you want. You can just continue to own the NFT regardless if or creator or original owner of it is gone or still in place. And the beauty of like protocols like Filecoin and IPFS is that they will even work if we are gone as a project from the market completely. We designed all the protocols so that they are even agnostic to what we decide about them, and they still work the same. CIDs will be still pointing to your content, and it's your control to point the NFT to a certain file, and then it's up to the network to remain storing your content and delivering it to you whenever you request. And going back to the point, are we yet in the Web3, or how soon the Web3 will be everywhere? I think that's how it comes to any technology. We were just using phones all the time. There was no internet. Boom, 5 years, it was everywhere, and we haven't even thought about this. And that, I believe, what would happen with Web3 as well. Right now here, we are all interested, excited about the technology, but it will be a dramatic shift at some point of time where it will be everywhere. And it might be even in the background, so it doesn't mean that everyone needs to know what Web3 is. The same way, no one really needs to know how internet works. But you get your content, you get your excitement, you get your communication with your family and friends, even across the world, across a sea. You can see your grandmother, or you can see and communicate with your friends. And you don't need to know how internet works to do so. And that's what exactly Web3 will do very, very soon to the industry, that it will be an operating layer behind, and all the content will be distributed, hopefully decentralized, but the access and applications layer will still serve you with the content you are looking for the content creators you are looking for. And it will just work independently of centralized solutions, which we are all fighting to avoid in the future.
Yeah, for me it's very interesting. I think for me Web3 means like how it shapes our community. It's about efficiency. I'm wearing multiple hats. I'm like the founder of a company in the real world. I also run the Discord with like a lot of people that I've never seen. But I can, like online, I can be very efficient with them. Like we can decide on things, we can move things, we can move funds, we can decide on budget decisions, stuff like this very easily. I'm a huge fan of cryptography, private key signing when I'm wearing my company hat. And I'm dealing with lawyers, for example. They send me documents, I print them, I sign them with blue ink, I scan them and send them back. Or when we have to pay them and it's a larger amount, then it's pending in the online banking, and it's like so inefficient that I just want to go back and just want to do stuff and ignore all of this. We're not there yet that we can ignore this, but I think like what we're doing already online will, and what our generation basically is doing will shape like the future, how we will just a lot of processes make more efficient, more like suitable for our interactions and our needs. The big question is always like, can we do the same without the blockchain, just with a database and internet? Yes, we can do a lot of like private key cryptography. We can do this without blockchain. There are aspects of permanence and trustlessness that the blockchain adds, and I think this is also very valuable and that we only find with Web3.
And I really like your point on talking about payments. I really like this joke where if someone says that crypto is useless, you should make this person do a wire transfer for banking. And that's exactly the point where you realize, especially from Web3 world, how fucked up some of the systems are. And really enabling people to have the control of that, being owner of the decisions that you make through crypto, through paying, through digital signing even, and communicating with your community independently of the legal structure or legal framework that your country requires, is an amazing thing. And we're just going step by step, giving more and more adoption, giving more and more integration, both on like application layer, which most of you are facing, more to the protocol layer, to the interoperability layer, to the internet level, where it's just the same tools are happening, or it's just the same push is happening to ensure that this is by default your ability to do transfer regardless of like central bank saying no, that's a too big transfer, or you cannot transfer to a certain country. It's rather I own my money. I really want to do something with them. And it should not be up to someone else's decision to if I can operate or not with them. What's your take on that?
Yeah, I mean, look at Argentina. Right, that's probably got the highest crypto adoption rate in the world, and that's because people use it as a more stable form of currency than their actual, government-sanctioned currency. Like, inflation's just so out of control there that people have to use it. Globally, are we in an inflationary context that we may all find the need to use crypto as a more stable asset sometime soon? Maybe. But there is, I think crypto, blockchain is proving its utility in a lot of really interesting ways in different places.
Definitely. Do we have a time check?
Thank you. Really interesting talk. Thank you very much. I was kind of thinking while you were talking that most of the great points about Web3 are the points where there's kind of no humans involved. There's no human involved in making sure that you can access your IPFS content. There's no human involved in making sure you can watch a video on Livepeer. But it's interesting because we're building this in a way that we're adding a lot of human inference on top of it. I absolutely love DAOs. I think they're probably some of the most influential technology that's going to change how society works in general. But it's interesting to note that when you were really kind of explaining what's awesome about Web3, it was many things that didn't necessitate that kind of interaction. So I'm curious as to how you think the best version of Web3 would be. Is it something where humans have more control over their own things, or is it something where nobody can fuck with it? Nobody can change anything about the big rules of the game. So, thank you.
I didn't get my key messages out very well because I actually think humanity and being human and connecting with humans is fundamental to the success of Web3. I personally got full-time down the rabbit hole interested in blockchain when I learned about proof-of-stake protocols, because you actually needed human coordination through governance to decide how you wanted to upgrade and improve the technology. Bitcoin is a proof of work. Blockchain, you don't have to do that. It abstracts away that need for human coordination. I also think what incentivizes people to want to contribute to DAOs and crypto native projects is human connection, is a sense of community, that I'm bullish on people not looking necessarily for financial reward, but the reward of connecting with others and being part of a project together.
And maybe to add on top of that, when you talk about trustless internet or who in the end decides, I think these two distinctions should be made. First of all, we should disconnect the human from the protocol. You should be at the control of what you see or what you subscribe to or what you own. But at the same time, it should never be inbuilt into the protocol layer so that we give a freedom to someone to do so. So give an example of the Google or Twitter where they can ban people because it's inbuilt in the protocol that they can stop someone's account just because they want to or whatever reason. But at the same time, if you do communication decentralized, there is no central authority which can say this content should not be there. It's rather your then decision. So the content layer will still serve you all the content, IPFS, Livepeer, any content on the Web3. But at the same time, it's your decision to subscribe to what you want to see. So these are two important layers. One, protocol should be agnostic to censorship, to controlling what's happening inside, but it should be open for people to decide what they want to see. And that's, I think, the fundamental value where Web3 is dramatically changing how we operate in the internet of tomorrow and internet of today.
Yeah, I really like the question. The perfect Web3, is it more humans or more machines or more smart contracts in that sense? It's about the human in the end, right? We are interacting with each other, and just machines doing stuff is impossible, kind of. So we're building this for us, for the community, for people. Everything that is critical should be encoded as rules in smart contracts. If you should ask me, there's human error, and there's also a lot of bad actors that will not act in the interest of the community. So it's very cool that you have these tools, that you can write smart contracts that, based on rules, make decisions, fair decisions, based on true randomness even. We figured this out to a certain extent. So these are very powerful tools that help us to interact with each other and not screwing each other over. But in the end, yeah, it's finding the perfect balance. But yeah, ideally you don't put humans into positions of power so that they are authorities, that they can censor stuff, and that they are becoming like actors that are just acting in their own interests. So using these tools to get there is key.
Yeah, the trustlessness is important, right? If we have a trustless system, then we can essentially remove the things that are corrupting society, right? The greed, and the things that are taking away from what actually needs to be contributing meaningfully and impactfully to society, right? But on the other side of things, it's individual IP, individual sovereignty, individual freedom, which is also super important, because without that, then you can't have good actors facilitating the applications and the protocols that are being created to then facilitate all these great things that are going on. Oh, we have a DAO to fight climate change. Okay, cool. Well, we all now get to make a decision within a trustless, permissionless system that essentially protects us from someone stealing all of the funds and then running away to go invest it into oil. You know, and everyone who gets to contribute to that owns their own IP and gets to make their own sovereign decision within that space. So I think that there's a level of both that needs to be met for us to find a good place in Web3.
100% agree with that.
Question. You touched on the fact that you basically, through Web3, allow people to operate slightly outside anyone else's control. But we also have to be realistic. There are people with bad intentions and people who will exploit that. I guess my question is, what are your opinions and your thoughts on how that should be controlled, or if it should?
Destroy them.
That's an amazing question, and maybe to IPFS it's asked way, way more on almost every conference. What if someone wants to deliver the content which is illegal through your network? And I believe that's happening already. The thing is, and that's again coming back to the previous question, you should really decouple the protocol layer, like the data exchange layer, from community, from people layer, from actually interacting with it. Because data layer should not have the permission to control what you're sending for it. It's a data exchange. It's like a fundamental right that you have to access and distribute something. Then there is a second layer counts, which, first of all, either person has to decide whether he wants to receive it or not. Secondly, there is a larger community which should have decide whether they want to see or not some things. And at later stage, we also, well, we still have governments. We are not intending to exchange or substitute the governments, but they also impose certain rights on the communities, and they also have this control of something being illegal or not illegal. But it should not fundamentally flaw your ability to exchange information. Because if you, as soon as you build this in protocol, someone can utilize it for their own needs. But if you do the exchange in a decentralized, trustless way, then you're solving at least a bigger part of a problem where there is no backdoor where someone else can control what you're doing. It's then to certain authorities or community or individuals to control what they see, and that's why you can build on top of IPFS, whitelisting, blacklisting, certain content authorization and stuff, but it's not inside the protocol. It's just external tools that you build on top in order to facilitate the usability of this, what you have seen.
Yeah, I think the question how to protect people when it's outside of the control of authorities and sometimes legal areas, it's one of the biggest challenges for the space. The perfect example is encryption, which is a very powerful tool, and then governments have tried to ban encryption for like ages, because to avoid that communication is happening outside, that there's, I don't know, that people plan terror attacks or whatever in encrypted chats, or that there's drug dealing in encrypted chats. But it has also become a part of the internet now, where they mandate that things are encrypted, like patient data, encrypted, end-to-end encryption on the web is important for online banking and these kind of things. And sometimes they will argue we need a backdoor in the encryption to stay in control of this because the tool is too powerful. But I would argue, like, we as a society, we have to figure out how we deal with these powerful tools. It's similar to, like, you can give people a knife and they can cut cheese with it. They can stab each other. I'm not really sure if we need to control all these tools, like, to protect us. It's more a challenge for governance and, like, the society to figure out how to deal with these situations and make the best out of it.
Yeah, it's such a good question. Ultimately, self-sovereignty is also a really core principle of blockchain. And yes, while we need collective governance mechanisms that people, collectively agree to and sometimes delegate authority to, the ability to exit and leave something because you've determined it's not in your interest to continue to be a part of it is, like, actually a fundamental principle of how the space has evolved. Like, Bitcoin and Ethereum have been forked, into, like, Polkadot. It was like a rage quit of Ethereum. Might be, I don't know, that's probably fair to say. Rage, I don't love the idea of rage quitting. I don't love the idea of, like, not being able to work things out, but, like, ultimately, self-sovereignty means that you can act in your own self-interest and take what's valuable to you elsewhere.
I think we're out of time right now.
One last question?
One last question.
So venture capitalists and people who, I guess, deploy their capital for their own personal incentives, their own financial return, almost always outperform, like, a ragtag team of grassroots people, right? So if I had to build a football team, and it was just, my football team was, we all love football, we're just here to play, and your football team was, I've hired the best, I've paid the most for the best football players ever. The end result, or let's say we're building a house, the end result of your contractors versus my contractors, you would probably have a better house. And so how do we, as communities, avoid getting outperformed by venture capitalists who may have a different incentive if potentially at the end of the day they come out with a better product than sort of a decentralized, we all just did it for the love solution?
Yeah, that's an amazing question to the consensus mechanisms which we use in the decentralized networks. And while on the storage layer, I think what we aim for is to be agnostic, and there is no power which someone can behold and exactly on transferring your data. It's only your ability to transfer the data or not. When we are coming to the governing tokens, and I believe Shan has even a better view on that, I believe that with the governance, it's always the biggest challenge, whether you do it over a stake or over some other reasoning. How do you ensure that everyone is heard? That's a very, I mean, that's not a trivial thing, and different solutions provide you different consensus mechanisms. What I would rather aim for is try to ensure that as many of the decisions either could be voted all together independently of the stake and impose capital, because, like, capital is not always showing the right decision for the community. But at the same time, I would rather aim for having as much automation or as much smart contracts deciding the trivial stuff where the people can gain benefit. So it should be trustless, and it rather should be decided by a smart contract or a mechanism rather than actually people with a capital can vote over something they have an interest in. But I would be very excited to see the people who are more working with the government or governance tokens. So how do you do it?
Yeah, it's a difficult question because you used football as an example, and the key metric was, like, if you're winning games in blockchain, it's a lot about money. Like, can you outperform a fund, I think in a monetary sense, or can you contribute to a greater good? So first, I think you need to set the target right, like, what are you trying to do? And then, like, venture capitalists are working very efficient. They have, like, tools and a strategic approach to problems to solve them, whereas the community is more like a swarm, very, there's a lot of chaos in the communication, in the decision finding and everything. So I think bringing together both is the best, like having certain, like, tools, frameworks that the community can use to achieve the same goals, maybe personal wealth. Like, making a living from working in blockchain as a developer or whatever, and avoiding extraction of all the money that goes to VCs or funds just for profit. Just giving people the tools to be able to work in an environment where there is capital so that most of the participants can benefit from it. I think if you set this as your goal and work towards this, then it's not about like who outperforms whom, but it's a win-win. It's like WACME, basically, like everyone benefits.
Yeah, I think this setup of valuing different types of contributions to the success of a project, like a venture capitalist is contributing financial capital, but they're not necessarily contributing other forms of non-financial, labor-intensive capital. And so this is where like reputation-based governance systems become really important. And it's a huge challenge that a lot of crypto projects have right now, that your liquid token is also your governance token. So that means the more token you buy, the more governance power you have, which is not ideal. And Vitalik said a lot about this in the last year about the challenges of that, the need for non-liquid token voting. And so I think, you know, setting up new projects that are designing for that, for reputation-based incentive structures and governance structures is really important.
Thank you all for a great panel. And thank you all for being here. Can we get a round of applause?
You're an amazing audience. Thank you a lot.